Christchurch killer, the one who massacred the Muslims in the mosque.
You are.
But only the killer was to blame, not those who radicalized him into viewing Muslims as a threat to the West.
What you'll find is that if somebody put millions of dollars on someone's head, yours, for instance, or mine, and somebody then attacked us, you would think that the person who had put millions of dollars on our head would bear some responsibility.
How long do you think it'll be before we hear about Douglas being killed by a radical Muslim?
If you try and desecrate the sacred symbols of individuals, the gangster communities among them will deal with you, my friends.
A video of Islamist Mohammed Hijab threatening Douglas Murray goes viral. What he said after the attack on Salman Rushdie, and why the video is being shared now. Mohammed Hijab's old video, where he threatened that Muslim gangsters would deal with anyone who speaks against Islam, has resurfaced. An old video of Islamist Mohammed Hijab, who stirred up Muslims during the 2022 anti-Hindu violence in Leicester, is making the rounds on the internet. In the viral video, he can be heard issuing threats of violence and death to free speech advocates, journalists, thinkers, and intellectuals, specifically naming Douglas Murray, a critic of Muslim extremism. In the 54-second clip, Hijab warns that Muslim gangsters would deal with anyone who criticizes or speaks against Islam in the same way Colombian cartels deal with people who speak against them. In the video, Mohammed Hijab makes a threatening statement, saying that there are Muslim gangsters who will deal with anyone who attacks Islam. He implies that while the general approach of Muslims is not violent, they can't prevent these gangsters from acting violently, much like how people wouldn't dare speak against Colombian cartels due to fear of retaliation. Hijab further argues that to be a true free speech absolutist, one would have to deny the Holocaust and make racially insensitive comments toward black people. Using this argument, he justifies the call for violence against those who speak against Islam, claiming the right to define what constitutes an offense against Islam. Mohammed Hijab is publicly threatening anyone who criticizes Islamic symbols. It's not just Douglas Murray. It's important to note that the original full-length video was uploaded on August 19, 2022, by Islamist Mohammed Hijab on his YouTube channel following the attack on Salman Rushdie. In the 9-minute 16-second video, Hijab justifies the attack on Rushdie by an Islamist who acted according to the infamous fatwa issued by Iran's Ayatollah Khomeini. Hijab describes Rushdie as someone who openly criticizes Islam and the Islamic Prophet. In the video, he threatens that anyone who speaks against Islam will be dealt with by Muslim gangsters. He also mentions that Rushdie became a symbol for freedom of expression and speech in neoconservative or right-wing circles after Iran issued a fatwa against him.
We're not condoning such a thing at all. But that is a reality. We, the Muslims, at 1.8 billion, which represent, according to Pew, will represent a third of the population of the world. 1 in 3, at least 1 in 4 now. You don't think we have gangsters? We have Muslim gangsters as well. And when you go ahead and attack the sacred symbols of Islam, although our approach is not to do so, we can't stop the gangsters from dealing with you or anyone else. We can't stop the Muslim gangsters from dealing with you or anyone else. Just like if you go to Colombia and you speak about particular cartel in a specific manner, go to their area and be a man and speak about them. You want free speech absolutism? Don't just deny the Holocaust. Mock it if you're a real man and see what happens to your career.
Hijab argues that freedom of speech is often contrasted with Islamic blasphemy laws, Muslims in general, or Muslim reactions to the desecration of Islamic sacred symbols. He then questions whether this is appropriate. According to Hijab, since there are no blasphemy laws in Western nations, free speech absolutists who oppose penalizing blasphemy should also push to repeal legislation that penalizes Holocaust denial. In the video, Mohammed Hijab argues that freedom of speech is often used selectively against Muslims, leading to what he sees as unfair treatment of Muslim communities in Western countries. He believes that this selective application of free speech limits and harms the rights of Muslims who are minorities in these regions. Hijab suggests that those who criticize Muslim extremism or defend free speech may have hidden motives. Hijab further asserts that if someone attacks or disrespects the sacred symbols of any community, members of that community, including Muslims, will retaliate. He emphasizes that Muslims are a large global population and warns against speaking negatively about Islam or Muslims, suggesting that there are Muslim gangsters ready to respond to such criticism. In the video, Muhammad Hijab argues that discussions about free speech and blasphemy should not be focused solely on Islam. He criticizes those who specialize in or critique Islamic aspects of free speech while ignoring similar issues in other contexts. Hijab uses examples from Hindu extremism in India and the actions of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk in Turkey to argue that desecration of sacred symbols is dealt with harshly in various cultures, not just in Islam. Hijab claims that Muslims are unfairly portrayed as scapegoats in Western countries, where they are blamed for broader societal problems. He uses this portrayal to suggest that criticisms of Islam and Muslims are often exaggerated or misdirected. He also refers to an interaction between Douglas Murray and Abdullah al-Andalusi on the subject of free speech, noting that this discussion occurred in the context of the attack on Salman Rushdie. This context, according to Hijab, influences the framing of the debate on free speech limits and Islamic criticism. In that televised discussion, Douglas Murray criticised the weak excuses used to justify killings in the name of blasphemy. Ironically, this is the same rationale Islamist Hijab used to threaten people, warning them not to speak about Islam in any way other than what he approves.
Look, I've probably got to answer that. You'll have noticed, and all of your viewers will have noticed, that this Islamist lunatic in your studio can't answer the basic question. Let's try it again and make it simple for you. Why don't you say whether or not you are completely condemning of any violence against Salman Rushdie or anyone else who is deemed to have said something heretical? Why don't we start with the basics for you?
Douglas Murray criticised the justification for violence in the name of blasphemy, arguing that the debate over whether there should be limits to free speech is outdated. He pointed out that societies already have laws against incitement, and that reacting with increased sensitivity to those who burn books they haven't read, like the fatwa against Salman Rushdie, is not productive. He noted that Ayatollah Khomeini had not read the satanic verses before calling for Rushdie's death, and drew a parallel to the murder of Charlie Hebdo cartoonists.
Killer, the one who massacred the Muslims in the mosque, but only the killer was to blame, not those who radicalized him into viewing Muslims as a threat to the West.
What you'll find is that if somebody put millions of dollars on someone's head, yours, for instance, or mine, and somebody then attacked us, you would think that the person who had put millions of dollars on our head would bear some responsibility. But because you're such a dishonest weasel, you're not even willing to do that. You're not even willing to do the basic thing of condemning the attack.
Sticks and stones, Douglas Murray, sticks and stones.
Why don't we
You need to demonstrate that the person was motivated by the reward.
I'll tell you what I'd like to motivate. I'll tell you what I'd like to demonstrate.
Murray claimed that the fatwa against Rushdie had a negative impact on free speech, as it empowered extremists by showing that threats and violence could be effective. He argued that the success of the fatwa encouraged more extremists to use intimidation and violence to suppress free expression. Murray further criticised Britain for allowing Muslims in Bradford to burn the satanic verses on the streets in 1989. He also condemned the fact that figures like Stevens were allowed to excuse the murder of Salman Rushdie on television, and that Iranian officials who called for Rushdie's death were allowed to live in London. He questioned how such actions were permitted, suggesting it was a significant oversight. In the debate, another Islamist apologist, Abdullah al-Andalusi, was repeatedly asked to condemn Iran's claim that Rushdie was to blame for the attack on him, but avoided doing so. Andalusi argued that only the assailant should be blamed, not the person who incited or radicalized him. Andalusi accused Douglas Murray of supporting restrictions on Muslim speakers at universities, advocating a ban on the burqa in public buildings, and imposing social barriers that make it harder for Muslim migrants in Europe. Meanwhile, Muhammad Hijab's video, in which he made threatening remarks, suggests that Andalusi and similar individuals have achieved their goals. The video clips have been going viral as people link various interviews of Hijab and Murray, who is critical of Islam, on shows like Piers Morgan's. These clips often involve discussions about the limits of free speech and threats to free speech from Islamist extremists. So, what do you think about the impact of these threats on free speech and the broader conversation about Islamic criticism? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with the latest news and discussions. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.